Hey everybody, welcome back to Game Bites, our show about creating video game assets. I'm Omni Jacala, and today I am joined by Chris Szczesiul.
Hey everybody.
And also joining us today is our lead animator for the Wess Dance project, Cara Jones.
Hello!
Speaking of the Wess Dance project, for those of you who may not know, we put out a video celebrating the 15th anniversary of Mother 3. Mm-hmm. So basically today we wanted to kind of dive into the process of how we made this, because it was a pretty big undertaking, and there's a lot of stuff that we want to kind of share with you guys. So, how about we just jump right into it? For those of you who don't know the Mother series, it's a little bit unusual for Mother 3 in that the game doesn't really have any promotional or like clay model or renders or any kind.
There's no official artwork at all.
Yeah, it's just the sprites. That's all we have to work from. So,
but Omni, you're telling me that the tons and tons of photography I've seen of clay models of the characters in Mother 3, that's not official artwork? What?
No, the ones that you've seen are probably done by Flint of Mother on DeviantArt. Those are the ones that people often assume are official, but they're not. They are fan-made. All we have, I mean, even if you look at like the Spirit in Smash Ultimate, there's just sprites, which looks very out of place compared to everything else on the game, because everything else has nice illustrations. But not Mother 3, we just have the sprites. There is, however, a concept that was... I don't know if this was drawn during the development of Earthbound 64, perhaps? I was thinking about... This concept art kind of reminds me of the dynamic of games like Ocarina of Time on the 64, because obviously when you're looking at 64 graphics, it's hard to really capture the intent of the artist. Mm-hmm. So they were usually using things like manuals and guidebooks to publish the artwork so that you can kind of imprint onto the player's mind what the character is like really meant to be. And if you look at what models we can see of Earthbound 64 before it was cancelled, the characters look very different from how they look on the GBA. So what this concept kind of does for me is it kind of gives a glimpse of what Wes's model was kind of aiming to be. But yeah, there's some like ideas that are still in the sprite. Like he still has like a kind of mohawk-esque hairdo on the top of his head surrounded by baldness, and then the hair on the sides that curls up. There's very vague ideas that are still carried over to the sprite, but other aspects of it are obviously very different. So then let's kind of talk about where we decided to take it.
Omni sketched up this really angry version of Wess, and from there, we just kind of took it and ran and went through a lot of iterations. I made a turnaround where he was even angrier. We did a first sculpt pass on it and continued the anger.
Well, I mean, the character is a very angry character, so...
Oh yeah, he is not a nice man.
I guess the anger wasn't going to be denied. It just kept coming through, despite our best efforts. As we started to translate the design, the sculpting process was a pretty collaborative effort. One of the other artists, Mark Lambert, had his hand on it for a while, and then it kind of traded hands over the process. And eventually, we arrived at something that we thought was pretty cool. The hair was one of those landmarks that was tough to get right, just because obviously the sprite's not going to give us a lot of help. And so
we actually got some comments about the hair in general.
Yeah.
On the Wess Dance video, the original. So some people were saying that it was potentially a little bit too far off from the original.
Well, the adjective that was used was too detailed.
Too detailed, right.
I actually had a little bit of a conversation with the person in the comments, and I want to touch on this because I thought it would be good to talk about it in this video, but Duster was actually one of the characters that we did before Wess, and so the hair that we did for Duster definitely informed how we handled Wes's hair because they're related, so they should have a lot of the same shape vocabulary. So after we pulled some of the sharpness and pointiness, you can kind of see that sort of upturned shape in Duster's hair. That was definitely something that's in common even just from the sprites between the two characters. So we wanted to capture that. And yeah, I mean, that's sort of the general approach we took, was just kind of make Wess feel like an older Duster.
If you do compare it to the original Earthbound characters, their hair definitely feels less detailed. We did earlier iterations of both Duster and Wess, and they were simpler, and it just didn't fit their character. And it is possible, we have clay. We sculpted, with our tools. You could just grab a knife and start to sculpt into it. And it is possible to get sharp edges.
Yeah, have you ever watched Sculpture Geek? It's crazy. He goes super detailed with his characters. So it's definitely something they could do.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think part of it's also, if you think of the way that games artwork evolves through different installments in the series, like, the technology has changed, so we wanted to try to evolve. Like, what if Nintendo made Mother 3 today? They wouldn't just settle for making the art on the same level as something they made in the 90s. They would probably say, how can we elevate the style a little bit while still staying true to the general aesthetic? But we just wanted to say, let's inject a little bit more detail in places. And so that's sort of one of those liberties that we had to take. It's like, how would this evolve? Switching gears a little bit toward the 3D side of things. Obviously, we're not making literal clay models here. We're making 3D models that are meant to imitate clay models. So let's talk a little bit about that sort of approach to the 3D modeling. We were going for like a Switch-esque benchmark for the models that we were making, because we figured that would just kind of make it feel more authentic. We could be going for like PS5, but then it wouldn't feel like a Nintendo game because Nintendo's always behind, So the benchmark was sort of like, keep the models around 20K or less, 15K. That felt appropriate for a Nintendo game that's got to run at 60 frames per second on mobile hardware like the Switch.
Yeah, and again, just for comparison's sake, for those of you watching who don't know, polygons and all that, the stuff that makes up 3D models, your average Nintendo character is probably about between 8K or something like that, depending upon what game it's in.
Depends on the complexity.
Yeah. Spider-Man for the PS4, there's dozens of costumes in that game, and each of them has like 80,000 polygons, tries.
Yeah. But we still wanted to make sure that even with sort of on the lower end of the poly count, we wanted to make sure it still feels nice and round. And so we had to do a lot of normal map baking so that we could get the information from the high-res models that we did. We did sculpt first before we retopologized them and made the game-ready models. Something that we do to make it look like it's a lot higher poly than it is we bake the normal information onto a normal map texture, and then that sort of fakes the geometry, so you could take something that's much lower in poly count and make it seem round, as long as you're not looking at the silhouette, like the angular polygons on the silhouette. It really sells an illusion. When we were thinking about the general approach we wanted to take to like creating the brand of this remake, I guess, and like if this was going to be a real game, there's going to be promotional art or something like that. In our minds, it was going to have clay art or, like these figurines just like the other games did. But for this one, we kind of drew some inspiration from a lot of the stop motion animations or feature films that have been released by studios like Aardman and Laika. And so we wanted to pull some of that methodology, or like the how they created the hair. Usually they make it out of like a silicone or something like that.
Yeah, all of their characters in the most recent movies, a very interesting process. What they do is now with modern technology, we've had it for over a decade now, they model their characters and they 3D print the pieces, especially with the expressions. They would literally just print thousands of faces and do the in-betweens and everything.
What Laika has done is definitely one of my favorite things to come out of like modern day stop motion, is them using the technology to their advantage, not to cheat, not to like not do the animation, but to like, hey, let's use this to get more detail, better lighting, better expression. And it's just amazing, especially like the material they had to use and how they have to treat all of the pieces, how they now don't have to worry about freckle placement, like the freckles are just printed on right. And they don't have to worry about it at all. It's fascinating stuff. Yeah,
the consistency between all of the different frames of the face is always going to be pretty much perfect because they don't have to worry about, human error in the same way.
What makes an animation look like claymation or stop motion?
Well, it would be doing every frame by hand, essentially. Because that's what hand-drawn is, for instance, like every single frame, or rather every 2 frames for most hand-drawn animation, especially on 24 frames per second. And to achieve that in 3D, most 3D is done with splines. Like, there's like a definite smoothness through the translation, rotation, and sometimes scale of the rig. And instead of relying on splines and like the computer automatically doing that motion, what we do is that we key for us it was every 4 frames because it was on 60 frames per second. So every 4 frames we would make a keyframe that would stop the motion and make it look a little, not jankier, but a little more stuttered, not as smooth, so that your eye is tricked into thinking, oh, this was sculpted and manipulated by hand, which it technically was.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, just electronic hands, that's all.
Yeah.
Instead of being, like you were saying, a smooth slope between each of the animation keyframes, it's actually a step. So it'll just snap to that next. I just actually snapped. It'll snap to that to that next frame, and that's what gives it its organicness, that's life, because that's what they used to do on the claymation films. And I mean,
and what they still
do. Well done. Sure, yeah. Everyone in the comments agreed that the animation very much thrived and felt like such.
All of your comments, like on the animation, made my heart sing. I loved it so much, everybody. It was very nice to see that feedback and see people appreciate how it looked. So thank you all for noticing.
Yes. Yeah, the game developers of what's the series called? They did Dragon Ball Fighters with a Z.
They call it step tangent, is usually what it's called. If it's not like a super smooth movement, is what it's called sometimes.
Yeah, I remember watching a GDC talk by one of the artists talking about how to make their 3D animation look convincingly 2D, and a large part of that is just capturing the imperfections that you would get when you're doing 2D, because we're not perfect, we're not computers, so the interpolation between keyframes that we would do by hand, a computer would do it perfectly. So just seeing that, like you said, kind of janky, but in a charming way, really makes it feel authentic to the style. And it was nice to see those comments all say claymation when they were never prompted to. We never said we're trying to do stop motion.
Yeah,
in
here's
the
our claymation
like
Mother 3. Yeah.
Right. They picked it up intuitively. So you did your job great.
Thank you.
So, Cara, tell us a little bit about the difficulties in matching the animation to the original sprite, because, there is an original sprite to reference. How was the translation of that?
Well, I feel like the difficulty was adding in, like, our own creative spin to it. Because when I originally did my first pass, and I personally have this issue when I come to, like, recreating artwork or just referencing something, I try and, like, be as faithful as possible to a fault. So when I first sent it over to you guys, it was very stiff. So when I originally showed it to you guys, like, I think Omni was like, oh, let's rotate that head. You had to, like, not give me permission, but just, like, push, like, hey, let's make it better. Let's, like, really push it.
Yeah, especially with the dancing, because the dance in the original was already fairly detailed, so there's a lot that you could pretty directly interpret from it. But I just wanted to really see what was the artist really trying to get at. Like, so a lot of actual trying to imitate the dance happened. I'm sure that happened on your end as well a lot.
Yes, there is a recording of myself doing parts of the dance that will never see the light of day.
Yeah, I never bothered recording myself, but I definitely got some ideas just from trying to act it out. And that's something that, if you ever watch some behind the scenes of Pixar or Disney animation, that's something that they'll do a lot, is
it helps.
Because
it helps a lot.
There's recently online, I wish I knew who the artist was, but they worked on the Ratchet & Clank game that just came out. It must have been the same one. But he released, like, all of his reference animation for all of his scenes he worked on, and they were incredible. Like, you can see where he took his reference to, and pushed it more on the character and made it more faithful to the character. Animators are actors with a pencil. And, you have to, you are making acting choices always when you're an animator. And you're just playing all these different characters. You're just doing it in a way that's not your body. It's your art. Oh, we need to cover the before and you have to show the reference you showed me for fixing his butt. The two spheres that you made look like an ass swing back and forth.
Yes, I was very particular about how the butt should animate on this. I mean, we even went through the trouble.
We were gonna ride or die on this butt.
Oh yeah. I think after that change happened, I think you, Chris, said, "Oh my gosh, it's mesmerizing."
Yeah, we were very particular. Like, even the deformation of the rig wasn't quite right without a shape key adjustment. So we have a blend shape specifically so that his butt still looks buttish.
Yeah.
When he bends down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was a lot of during the rig process where I would just put him in that pose. And like I'm just painting away around his thas area, just like, okay, gotta get it just right.
The weight painting.
Yeah, the weight painting. Like that drag on his butt, like translated so nicely after that change. Like there's definitely a before and after of like, oh, we're here. We've arrived at a good animation.
Just jumping in here from the more recent past to let you know that we are going to be continuing this conversation in another video. The full conversation that we had was actually over an hour long, I think it was. And so we decided to take the best parts of that and create sort of an abridged version that we're posting here on YouTube. But we are also posting the full uncut audio of our conversation over on Patreon. So if that's something that you're interested in, you only have to be a $1 patron or higher to get access to that. So hope you check it out. But for now, thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope we'll see you in the follow-up video that we'll be posting on our channel pretty soon. So thanks again for watching, and we'll catch you guys next time.